everyone, and welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you took time to be with us this week. A lot to talk about this week, which includes politics, changes for the Kentucky Derby, and we're going to be talking with Duncan Taylor, the man that runs TaylorMade Farm, well-respected breeding and sales operation in Kentucky. The Taylor family, long known for their care of horses. A little bit of controversy earlier this year when California Chrome, the loved California Chrome, was sent to Japan. We'll talk about that decision that TaylorMade had to make. And we'll talk with Steve Haskin of the Bloodhorse. Yes, it's that time of the year, and he's already out with his Derby dozen. It's a great way to keep up with who is hot and who is not on the Derby trail. And at this stage, let's face it, they pop up. Ooh, this looks like the best horse. No, this horse looks better. And such has been the case. That's the way it was over the weekend recently. Max Player wins the Weathers. Oh, he looks good. 1,000 Words, trained by one Bob Baffert, wins. Oh, always keep an eye on a Baffert horse. All these horses that keep coming up, and they have their moment, and you go, wow, like Tiz the Law, also looking good, winning the Holy Bull down in Florida. So that's what happens this time of the year. And the Derby is always exciting to talk about, and especially this week when there's actually news about changes at Churchill Downs. And the big change is the starting gate. With me, as always, on lead guitar this week is Ben Chaffins. Hello, Ben.
Hello, sir.
And our researcher extraordinaire, Mr. Thomas Kenny. Hello, Thomas.
How are we doing today?
Good. And so something new this week coming out of Churchill Downs. That is a starting gate.
As most of you know, the standard starting gate for Churchill Downs is a 14-horse gate, and they added an auxiliary gate for 6 more spots, totaling up to a 20-horse potential field for the Kentucky Derby.
And the difference in this one is going to be, this is a contiguous gate. So you're going to be able to load them all in. As you talked about, there's 14 is the standard. Nobody ever runs in 20-horse races, 18, 19, 20-horse races, except during the Derby. That's how big it is in the States. You want to win the Derby. If you can't win the Derby, you want a piece of it. You want your horse to finish second or third or fourth, at least be in the running. And because of that, you have horses that shouldn't be in it every year, but they are. And there's enough upsets, so it's hard to say this horse can't be in it, like Country House last year, one of the biggest upsets. And, of course, horses that come along the way that maybe were overlooked, like a Funny Side that had a chance for a Triple Crown that won 2 legs. A California Chrome that wasn't specially bred, outran his breeding and won 2 legs of the Triple Crown. So who can you say shouldn't be in the Kentucky Derby? And, therefore, that's why you have 20 horse fields.
That's why they bet, right? It's because you never know what's going to happen.
If we had a horse, a 3-year-old horse, you only have one shot. It's the ultimate one and done. Of course, you would take a chance and put him in the Kentucky Derby.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you got the money for a horse, you probably got the money to put him into the Derby, so you'd give it a shot. This is going to be a contiguous deal, so that means there's not going to be that gap from number 14, the end of the standard horse gate, and adding on the other 6, the auxiliary gate, and there is that gap between the 14 and 15 positions. Mike Smith, who knows a little bit about winning derbies and Triple Crowns, among those coming out and saying, this is a great deal for horse racing.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to talk about starting position giving you whatever advantage in the start of a race, but having that gap between 14 and 15 just didn't make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of things.
And at first, nobody thought it was going to keep growing like it did, but it did, and it took off. And finally, after years, some cynics have said, these social media outlets, it's about time. Well, at least they did it.
Yeah.
It took a while, but they did it.
The last 22 Kentucky Derbies have used that auxiliary gate. You can make an argument that, maybe one year, maybe there'll only be 14 horses in the Derby, and it won't even matter. Well, the last 22 times in a row, it has been a big deal. And
it's not going to stop. Ben Chaffins has a horse next year that's good. He's putting it in the Derby, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to win it. I don't care if you're 50-1. I don't care. You'll be the next Mind That Bird, but you're going to take a shot because, like you say, that's why they do it. One thing that's interesting, the coalition of horse racing, which is a wonderful thing, the intent is great. The execution, we'll have to wait and see. I don't think that's necessarily being cynical, but over the years, horse racing's had a lot of good ideas, but they haven't followed through. So we'll see how it goes. One thing that's interesting is the politics that's getting involved now, as if we need more government involved in anything. And I'm not getting libertarian or Republican or Democrat on you, but do you want how much government regulation? Recently, a bipartisan deal. Paul Tonko, a Democrat in New York, Andy Barr, a Republican from Kentucky. They have got this measure before the House right now where they're trying to talk, basically, to get to the gist of it. Okay, here it is. It's about medication rules and drug testing, how it's handled in horse racing. And they're trying to make it across the board, which is also kind of what the coalition's trying to do. So I'm really not sure. I'm a little confused. Next week, we're going to talk more about that with a man who's actually in D.C. this week, is why he couldn't be on the show, is what's the difference? You got a coalition, and now you're getting politicians involved, huh?
In my mind, at least, the idea of, a sort of self-regulating body like the coalition is to make it so that you don't have to get the government involved.
That would seem to be the case. And they keep adding to the coalition, including my good friend Donna Brothers has been appointed to this safety coalition. And it's good that they have people like that have been involved in the sport. Of course, Donna, not just as a broadcaster, but as a jockey. They have some veterinarians that they've added to the board from Haggard. They brought in Stuart Brown, who's very well respected and known. And people like that, I want to hear from them more than I do politicians.
Exactly.
And I just think the more politicians get involved, as well-intended as they might be, then there's more regulations. And the thing is, every state is individual. Therein lies a lot of the problem with horse racing. Governors appoint most of the board of directors of state racing commissions. It's not a federal deal. It's a state deal. And therein lies the problem. California wants to do what they want to do, what Kentucky does, what they want to do, what New York, what Arkansas. And the coalition is supposed to try to bring all these people together.
Especially since, everything, including, the climates surrounding the racetracks is different in all these states. The types of breeding you might see of horses is going to be different in all these different states. It's hard to come to a consensus that will work for everybody. So you have to be very careful.
Yeah, and one thing that I don't think anybody's going to argue about, there does need to be uniformity in racing.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly in the use of drugs, what drugs can be used, when they can be used to eliminate confusion. But therein lies a lot of confusion. How do you do it? Ben, any ideas?
I just think that there's probably a table of people that are smarter than me who can figure that out.
Well, we're yet to find them. Hopefully they will with the coalition. Hopefully maybe whatever works out in Washington does. We do know this, a man that knows a lot about horse racing, well-respected. Duncan Taylor's coming up next from Taylor Made Farm. Only here on The Horse Racing Show. Be sure to stay with us. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. Thanks for listening on the radio, on iTunes, Google Play, or tuning in on YouTube. I'm Kenny Rice. One of the great things about this is catching up with old friends over the years and people that just know the sport inside and out. And one of those families, the Taylor family, I had the pleasure of meeting Joe Taylor long ago. He was very kind to me when I was starting out covering this sport. He's a legend in the sport. As far as taking care of horses and getting them ready for sales and the breeding industry and all that. And it's been carried on by his sons at Taylor Made Farm, and the president and CEO of the farm is Duncan Taylor, who joins us now. Duncan, thanks for being on.
For the sport, and I'm glad to be on.
Now, this is the time of year where you're doing a lot of everything, aren't you? You're getting ready for sales. Of course, you got to look at breeding season. Thanks for your time, because I know how busy it is.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on, and thankfully, we have a lot of brothers. I always joke with people and say, they say, how do you do it? How do you brothers get along and stuff like that? And I say, well, we got the Catholic business plan. So they say, what's that? And I say, well, your parents, they didn't use birth control, and they had a kid every 2 years, and it happened to be a boy every 2 years in the Taylor household. And my dad trained us all in the business. So when we, as I went in the office, as the farm got a lot bigger, I always had another brother coming right behind me. And if it had been up to me, I'd have been too cheap to hire a good guy, but my dad already had them trained and put them in place. So they just filled in. So as we grew, we always had another brother coming along that was trained by the same guy. So So we have a lot of blessings built in that sometimes we take for granted.
So now if Ben or Frank or Mark come to you and say, Duncan, I want a raise, do you do it by committee?
No, I just say I want an equal one to whatever you're getting. Because we made a pact after they had Frank jokes around and says, well, we didn't have to pay much for the stock, but we just had to become an indentured servant for about 10 years. So, but after their 10 years, they got equal pay. So basically, we don't have to fight about that anymore. But yeah, what I was saying is, there is a lot going on.
Yeah,
we have a lot of good people that work with us, and we have people on each of those divisions that are focused on that. So whether it's a horse country tour or foaling a mare or booking a mare or figuring out who to breed her to or trying to figure out what sale the horse ought to go into, we've got good people, and they're looking and they're watching out for our customers. And it's in business, it's pretty simple, but it's hard too, because if you can keep a single-minded focus on your customer and what they need, and you can deliver that, you can be successful. But it's a new challenge every day.
Duncan, what's the importance right now of a breeding season? Obviously, the key is that, with the January 1st being all thoroughbreds' birthdays, regardless of when they were actually born, the timing seems to be so important with being sure you get that mare in foal.
Yeah, that's for sure. The first date that we breed is about February 10th. And mare takes 11 months and 6 days. So if you map that out, she ought to be foaling January 16th. So you got 16 days window there. And if it comes on the 29th, you got a year-old foal that's going to be a year behind when it goes to the races. So, foals foal from January 1st, hopefully, all the way through the middle to the end of June. And that whole, we call it a crop of horses, race against each other. And the races are restricted in their 2 and 3 year old years just to race against their peers that were born the same year. And then as 4-year-olds, they start, and maybe late 3-year-old, there's a couple races against older horses, but they start to race against everybody. So, or all other horses. So that, and a mare is like, in the business world, it would be like owning a factory. So if our job here on the farm is to get the mare in foal as quickly as we can, and to have her produce a healthy live foal. So, if the mare is a maiden mare, that means she's never been bred. We want her going to the shed between February 15th and March 1st, and we want her conceiving on that first cover, because the next year the mare will foal sometime in January, and then you have February, March, April, May to get her in foal. So the earlier you can keep the mare foaling, the more likely you can get a year's production out of your factory. And when the mare gets to be, if she foals in June, you don't have time to breed her back, and you're going to lose a year. So everybody's trying to keep those, get those mares in foal as early as they possibly can, and making sure they get a healthy live foal.
We're talking with Duncan Taylor, president and CEO of Taylor Made Farm, and he just explained it so eloquently how this business is just that much. It is a business, and for everybody that's setting out the railbirds, all you railbirds out there looking at your form and trying to figure things out, try to figure out gestation periods of mares and when to breed and all. I think that's more complicated at times than saying, hey, looks like he's stepping up in class or he's dropped, from his last race.
Yeah, and there's just like with every bet, there's money on the line for the owner if things don't go the right way.
How about and you're also getting ready for sales. Everything else is going on. TaylorMade's juggling a lot at this time.
Yeah, we're getting ready to go into the February sale out phasing on the 10th and the 11th of this month. And we have a good consignment. That sale, when it first started out, was sort of, it's at a weird time of year because the sales calendar originally was planned. I think they kept sales out of the breeding season because of all what's going on the farm.
Yeah.
And the only sales you had during the breeding season were 2-year-old sales, where most of the horses shipped out of Kentucky and were at warmer locations, and they weren't dealing with the same things we're dealing with at the farms and the nurseries. So Basic decided to put a February sale in, and it's gradually, I think, gotten better. We probably have 6 or 7 stakes winning or graded stakes winning or graded stakes place mares in the consignment this year. And so I think that people shouldn't overlook it, because there are good horses in the sale. And I think that probably better quality this year than we've had previously. So I think that, you could buy a maiden mare and be breeding her right after you buy her. So as we know, a lot of our customers are all about buying something and then reselling it later. So it's an opportunity for somebody that either wants a young mare to put in their breeding program for a long time, or somebody that thinks, hey, I think that mare is a little undervalued. I can buy her, put her in foal to a hot horse, and sell her in November and maybe get 30-40% on my money. So, so there's also, there's short yearlings, and then there's just your regular quality brood mare that somebody want to buy to breed. And she could either be in foal, she could have a foal, one could foal while the sale's actually going on. So there's a lot of things changing where in November you can study a mare's produce history, and you can pretty much know what is going to have to be told at the time you enter the mare. But this February sale, you could have one story planned, and then the mare has the foal, and then a whole new story develops. So it's a little more challenging in that way. But hey, I think it makes the more sales, the more liquid the business is, and I think it gives people opportunity if they do need to buy or sell, that it's a good thing. Just makes us always have our sales division out there working. We don't really get much time off anymore.
We're talking with Duncan Taylor, the president and CEO of TaylorMade Farm. More with Duncan when we come back here on The Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to The Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you've tuned in this week. Our special guest today is Duncan Taylor, who is the president and CEO of TaylorMade Farm. We've been talking about the intricacies of the breeding operation and about how you want to get the mare in foal at a certain time of the year. It's all a matter about money and time, and that's very important with all of us. I want to ask you first off now about a decision that TaylorMade had to make concerning California Chrome, one of the most beloved horses in a while, of course, Horse of the Year and almost Triple Crown winner, but the decision to send him to Japan. Was that one that was a tough one to make, Duncan?
Yes, it was. It was, we considered him part of the family. I know people are probably thinking, well, when's he going to sell Frank? So the business, and I got 130 people that are working here, and I don't know if I'm unfortunate or not, with a lot of big, strong businesses like Public Storage, or being the ruler of Dubai, or owning XL Communications or Standard Oil. Those come with a lot of responsibilities and a lot of headaches, but they have the benefit. The people that own them, that own horse farms, have extra funds, and if they stump their toe for $2 or $3 million, it's probably like me. My big team So it's not as it's not as damaging to their business. I'm not saying they don't care about money, and I'm not. I mean, that's just a luxury that they have, and they're
Right.
all run good operations, and they're good people. But when I go to compete against them, I can't just step out and pay more than I think something worth, or something that I'm going to be able to get mine and my customers' money back in a certain length of time. So we're judging everything and micromanaging the stallion and looking at indicators. And it's by no means anybody that bred to California Chrome. I have no idea if this horse is going to produce good runners or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he is, but in reality, how many horses go to stud and how many hit?
Right.
So I have to look at those numbers, and then we're a horse farm with a sales agency, and we have a sales focus. The horse like Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking to be maybe another Tappet, a great stallion.
Right.
They didn't like his first crop, the yearling buyers. They didn't like his second crop. But when they started running, they started liking them, and they start changing their opinion on what a horse ought to look like. But there is a time frame in between there that if the horse doesn't hit, and you're breeding so many mares to him of all your customers, that not only are you hurting the stallion that you're standing, but all the customers of yours that are breeding to the stallion, if they don't come out with that great physique and the horse doesn't run, that's two negatives. So basically the horses aren't going to bring a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So us being a sales organization, we took that into consideration. We took the amount we were getting paid, and we calculated what would have to happen for him hitting for us to be able to be profitable on the horse. So again, back to my what other people say, I'll sing in the blues, but I'm not really. But I do have to watch the dollars and cents. And a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. And Joe Taylor was a great teacher of that. Yeah. It's better to sell and regret than to keep and regret. So, with that, I think I've got lots of California Chrome foals myself. And if I get a good look at one, I'm still going to be able to sell it good, and it's going to sell well. And hopefully they'll come out running this year. I've heard some reports on a few of them that people like. I'm hoping he's the greatest stallion ever.
Yeah.
And they say, gosh, Duncan was the dumbest guy ever since Arthur sold Sunday Silence. Duncan is now taking over the throne. And I hope that's what happens, because I want the people that I sold the horse to do good, and I want the people that bred to him to do good. And I will say this, that there's a lot of fans out there that think they ought to be able to run the tailor-made business. And I appreciate every one of them. I do. It's serious. And
I know what you said. I just laugh because, every jockey we've had on, every trainer we've had on, they've also, just about everyone, they've said roughly everybody can train a horse, everybody can ride that horse, and everybody can select who you're supposed to breed to, I guess. Until it's.
But let me finish what I was saying. And I really do appreciate them, because without them, I don't have a business.
Right.
If people don't like horses, people don't come see them, people don't fall in love with them, people don't buy them, people don't race them, I have no business. So I have to try to do the best for everybody, and sometimes you can't do the best thing for everybody. And sometimes you make mistakes, and I'm hoping this was a big mistake. That's what I'm really hoping. But that's pretty much. If you got any other questions, that was the thinking that went into it, and it wasn't an easy decision, because if I'm not a person that falls in love with animals easy, but if there's ever a horse that I fell in love with, it was that horse.
Yeah, and like you say, It comes down to the business side of it all for anyone that has to make a tough business decision. I liked what your dad said. It's better to sell and regret than to hold on to it and regret. No matter what it is. No matter what it is. Hey, I appreciate your time, Duncan. I know you got a lot going on. The breeding season's starting. You got the sales in just a matter of days. It's always great to catch up, and we want to catch up more with TaylorMade Farm down the road.
All right, well, that's great. We appreciate it, and thanks to all your fans, and keep coming back.
All right, thank you so much, Duncan Taylor of TaylorMade Farm. More when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in again. If you're listening to us on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, or a radio station near you, we thank you. We thank this guy for his time. It's always great to catch up with him. He is a well-respected journalist, and as I tell people, they say, who you like in the Derby? I say, here's a must-read each week in Bloodhorse. Either pick it up, they'd probably rather you subscribe, or go online and read the Derby Dozen, which can be a little muddied sometimes. I guess it's a little dirty early on. Steve Haskin is the man that puts it all together and joins us. See,
hey, Kenny.
And I introduced.
It's only muddied in our minds because you know what they say about horses. That it takes a horse to make a person look like an ass. So.
That's so true.
And certainly the Derby ranks as number one.
And especially this time of the year. But it's always good to have a Lee Marvin movie reference in the show, isn't it? Jim Brown, and it's just great to have this. And you're kind of like Jim Brown running with those hand grenades right now, dropping them down in the holes. Because who can pick the top 12 horses right now?
Hey, Jim Brown got killed, so.
Well, yeah, just keep moving, Steve. Keep moving. That's right.
I'd rather be Charles Bronson. He's the only one of them that survived.
Oh, we all want to be Bronson. He was great. But it is. How difficult is it right now to sit down and say, okay, I can understand 3, 4, 5, 6, but when you start getting like the 9, 10, and 11, 12 right now, it's almost like to me, it's fascinating how you keep up with it all.
Well, the thing is, they're interchangeable, and you're always going to have people, because we open it for comments, and when it really gets into it, like last year, we had as much as 2,000 comments in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always going to be people say, how could you have this horse ahead of that horse? Or how could you have that horse ahead of this horse? How could you not have this horse in the top 12? And I try to explain it as best as I can. Why I rank each horse in the position that I do. But, it's all interchangeable. There's so little difference between number 5 and number 10. They could go either way. Any little thing can spur you to move a horse up or down. And listen, some years, it's like everything else. Some years are different than other years. Some years a horse will just stick out.
Mm-hmm.
Like American Pharaoh, even though he didn't race until the Rebel Stakes.
Right.
I loved everything about that horse. I loved his stride. I loved his perfect. Sometimes you look at a horse and you say, that's the one. And I kept American Pharaoh on top. Even when Dortmund was undefeated and was winning the Santa Anita Derby,
mm-hmm.
I still kept American Pharaoh on top. California Chrome, I discovered him when he won the Cal Cup Derby. I called up Alan Sherman and told him, I said, I really think you have a Derby horse here. And when he won the San Felipe, I put him number 1. I had him on top, but I had mentioned him prominently before that. Other years, it's a complete guess. You have no idea. You have no feeling. This was one of them. I had a tough time trying to figure out who to make number 1.
Mm-hmm.
This is the 3rd week, and I said, how do you separate them? The horse I really liked was Maxfield,
yeah.
Who had ankle chip surgery. And has been out, and I don't even know if he's going to make it. So there's no way in the world I could put him, any high. I think I ranked him 7 in the first
mm-hmm.
in the first listing. So I settled on Dennis's Moment only because of his ceiling is so high.
Yeah.
He's had such a weird, checkered, star-crossed career. He's a hell of a horse when he finishes a race,
yeah.
or when he doesn't get stumbles coming out of the gate or throws his rider. So you really don't know much about him. But the races, and listen, we're basing it on an 11-length maiden win, or whatever the margin was, or some gigantic margin.
Yeah, he blew it away. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, it was at Ellis Park. So you're basing it on that, and you're basing it on a victory in the Iroquois. But sometimes you look at a horse and you say, this horse has got it. Like even this week, I had him number one, but I didn't keep him number one. I moved Tiz the Law up to number one because he's a horse I loved because I'm a sucker for the Champagne Stakes.
Mm-hmm.
As an old time veteran, the Champagne Stakes used to be the championship race.
Right.
Whoever won the Champagne basically was the 2-year-old champion, or it basically solidified the horse's reputation. Once in a while you get a horse running the Garden State after that, or Laurel Futurity, but they weren't championship-making races. The Champagne was, and I still love the flat mile. We don't. You have those 2-turn Breeders' Cup dirt miles, which are totally meaningless. Mm-hmm. But to me, a mile should be at a flat mile. And if a horse can win the Champagne as a 2-year-old, it shows a lot. And the way Tiz the Law won the race, beating a horse that I really liked a lot in Green Light Go, I said, this horse looks terrific. And then he finishes third in the Kentucky Jockey Club, but he had a million excuses. And I ranked him number 4 starting out, and I said, ignore that race. I said he just had too much trouble in there. He just never seemed comfortable. He lost his action. I said, we'll see what happens. If he comes back, in a Holy Bull and runs big, he's going to be number 1. And he did, and he is.
We're talking with Steve Haskin of the Bloodhorse. He does the Derby Dozen. It's must read to keep up with the Derby scene. And, we're talking about Dennis's moment and the stumble that he had at the Breeders' Cup, at the Juvenile Breeders' Cup. And Maxfield was pulled out of that because of an injury. And you got the long shot, Storm the Court, that wins it. So it was an interesting year in many ways for racing on so many levels in 19, Steve. But, with the 2-year-old picture, nothing was cleared up after the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, I didn't think.
Oh, certainly not. I mean, the Breeders' Cup didn't clear anything up. I think one of the races that helped clear it up was the Los Al Futurity.
Yeah.
When the runner-up, Anno Dor, came back and ran 1,000 Words, who Bob Baffert thinks is his next, major star, ran him to a nose. So that justified really the form of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. At least it showed that Storm the Court beat a good horse. Now, the trouble, with Anno Dor was coming off an 8-length maiden win on the grass in his career debut at Golden Gate. So nobody knew what to expect, but he had dirt breeding. His breeding was, it was mostly dirt. So for him to run a race like that, you figure the future is bright. Now, if you look at the Breeders' Cup and you look at the Los Al Futurity, this horse was under furious whipping on both of them. In the Breeders' Cup, he was whipped 17 times. And he was whipped even more than that in the Los Al Futurity. He was whipped close to 20 times. And he just would not go by Storm the Court and would not go by 1,000 Words. Mm-hmm. So that was that was my one knock against him, is that he just looked like a horse that doesn't want to pass other horses. But it looks like he's going to get blinkers next time. And I think the blinkers are going to help this horse enormously. So don't be surprised to see this horse emerge. In fact, I even moved him up several spots just on the speculation of what he's going to do with blinkers. So I believe he's going to move up. I think he's a very talented horse. So if Storm the Court comes back and runs a pretty good race in the San Vicente, I like the fact that he's making his first start in the sprint. It's what every 3-year-old champion and every classic winner in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s did. And nobody does it anymore because it doesn't have points. And everybody's looking for points. They're not looking for the best way of getting to the Derby. They're just looking to get to the Derby. And if a race doesn't have points, they don't want to have anything to do with it. So Churchill refuses to give points to races like the Swale and the Hutchinson and the San Vicente. And we used to have the Bayshore. All the champions ran in those races. Mm-hmm. Every one of them. So I like the fact that Storm the Court is dropping back to a sprint. Doesn't have to win. But Peter Urton is an old school trainer, and he feels that this is what's best for his horse, and I give him a lot of credit for it. He said, I'll worry about points afterwards. If he doesn't get points in his next 2 starts afterwards, then he doesn't belong in the Derby. So if he can get a good sharpener in there, that's what horses need, I believe, because I think we're dulling our horses with all these long races.
We're talking with Steve Haskin of the Bloodhorse, the man who is the architect of the Derby Dozen. More with Steve when we come right back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for tuning in. You want to know who's going to win the Derby? Then check out the Bloodhorse Derby Dozen each week. Steve Haskin will tell you. And you've had good success. I mean, if you look at the Derby Dozen each week, and you go back and look at the Derbies, I mean, you've got, if you're not winning it, you're coming close.
Well, I try. So, like I said, a lot of times they make fools out of you. But, I go back to certain horses. Fusaichi Pegasus was the first and only horse I've ever had number one off an allowance win. That's how impressed I was with him. And he was number one the whole time. Monarchos was up there the whole time. And a lot of it is based on we can watch the workouts now on XBTV. It used to be that when I used to cover the Derby, I used to get there 2 weeks ahead of time, and there was no way for anybody to see workouts. So I was the eyes and ears. I was really the only one there. Mm-hmm. I think the only person there in the morning 2 weeks before was Jenny Reese when she was with the Courier Journal. But when I took over Derby Doings for Joe Hirsch, he basically would write a workout and then give a quote from a trainer. But I would observe it and give my own personal opinions when I took over Derby Doings from Joe. So I was the eyes and ears. So I had to watch every workout. If I missed one, it was a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Then TVG came along with the works, and they would show it at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'd go back to my hotel and watch all those works, and it just made my job so much easier.
It's civility. It's like civility now. You don't have to be out there all day.
Right, exactly. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed watching the works because I said, look, if I screw it up, nobody's going to know because nobody's seen the works. There's no fractions.
Right.
Nobody lists fractions. They just put a workout and have a trainer quote, and that's it. So I said, I can say anything I want. But, I mean, a lot of horses, all of a sudden you see, I remember Super Saver. I mean, Todd Pletcher had another, I can't off the top of my head. He had a filly running in the Derby, and she was a big horse, and she had a big 6 furlong work, and nobody paid any attention to Super Saver working a half mile. And I said, that was the work of the day. It's just something you see about it. Street sense just blew you away in the morning. I mean, the acceleration he showed in his workout. So a lot of times you just look at the workouts. You can't, for a while you couldn't do that this early. But now a lot of the works, like I said, are on XBTV, so you can watch them and judge for yourself who's looking good in the morning. But the main thing is that you just got to combine, does the horse have the mind? Does he have the brilliance? Does he have the pedigree? Does he have the turn of foot? I try to eliminate most horses that are committed to the lead. I don't mind a horse going to the front if he does it because he's just the best horse. But if he has to be on the lead, I won't pay too much attention to him. I want to see a horse with the ability to rate. And the Derby's changed now. It's very, very rare that you see a horse coming from, 16th or 17th to win the Derby. We saw Orb do it. But now it just seems like a lot of the Derby winners are just sitting right off the pace or just close to it. And, like I said, it's all changed. And the reason is that we don't know the horses because they don't run. I remember horses. We'd have horses with 20 lifetime starts going into the Derby. They would run, at least 3, 4, 5 times, mostly 4 or 5 times as a 3-year-old. Now everybody wants 2 races. That's it, 2 races. And you look at Justify winning the Triple Crown, having 3 starts in his life.
Well, that has to be the biggest change. Talking with Steve Haskin here, is that if someone came in with like a couple of races, you thought, what's been wrong? What have they been hiding? Right? And now
exactly.
And now it's thrown off. I remember like Barbaro. When Barbaro won, I was down there when he won the Florida Derby, and you wondered, does Michael Mass know what he's doing? Because it was like a 6 week before the Derby, and he's not going to race, and you can't win that far out. And then how many other times have come along? Animal Kingdom, is he a grass horse? What's going on? Graham Motion had him ready perfect.
Animal Kingdom made his dirt debut in the Kentucky Derby.
Exactly. So, why's this grass horse running in the Derby? I mean, it was craziness that's happened. And how does, when you look at a trainer now, does that factor in a whole lot? If you see a horse early on that you kind of maybe would put in the top 12, but it's a Pletcher or it's a Chad Brown or it's obviously a Baffert, does that influence at all that maybe they do know something even though you're not quite sure why this horse is running at that place?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's all it's all part of it. Yeah, you can look at the jockey too, but not as much as the trainer. But listen. We've had trainers win the Derby that have never even been close to Churchill Downs.
Mhm.
It happens all the time.
Right.
So you start you're looking at horses like Mind That Bird. You start you see Chip Woolley. You say, who the heck is Chip Woolley? And the funny thing is I remember I got a call that year in 2009. I got a call from Darren Rogers at Churchill Downs. I had all my horses set. It was like early April, and most of the horses were set. And I knew all the horses. And I get a call from Darren Rogers, who's the head of the publicity
Right.
at Churchill Downs. He says, I got 2 new Derby starters. I go, really? I said, oh, geez. I said, no, I said, who's coming in the Derby picture this late? He says, well, we got a horse named Mind That Bird, trained by Benny Woolley. And we got another horse named Summerbird, trained by Tim Ice. I go, who? I never heard of the horses. I didn't heard of the horses war. I never heard of the trainers. He says, I got their phone numbers if you want to call them. So I did. I called both of them. I got some standard quotes. Yeah, well, we figured this, figured that. And I wrote a column, for the website, saying like the birds are coming to the Derby. And they wound up winning the Derby and the Belmont Stakes.
Oh, I know.
2 classic winners. So you just never know. It's just, you never know where a Derby horse is going to come from. They just pop out of nowhere.
And for those that are going to be calling us or dropping you emails, I just looked it up right quick. That filly was Devil May Care that Todd had
Right,
in
Devil
10.
May Care, exactly.
Yeah, that
right.
was the one that he had in there when the Super Saver won it. Listen, we're going to be keeping up with you and probably check back in as we get closer to the big day. And I do appreciate your time, Steve.
Anytime, Kenny. I'm at your disposal.
Read him every week in the Bloodhorse.
I'm always willing to share my lack of information.
Well, we'll get that. We'll probably also get together and pick the NCAA tournament for the people as we get closer to that.
Well, that may be even harder.
This
Although
year,
you never know. By the way, all the George Masons, they look good for a while, but it's still the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Kansas that show up in the final. So
it is. Even though you kind of want a Dayton to get in there just to shake it all up.
Exactly.
All right, my friend Steve Haskin with us here again. Be sure to check him out each weekend. The Bloodhorse with the Derby Dozen. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for your time today. Interesting show. I enjoy these kind of shows. Duncan Taylor, TaylorMade Farm, breaking down the breeding process. And it is a very intricate process. They just don't have the horses get together and mate and hopefully you get a foal. It's a timing period because time is money, Thomas Kenny.
That's right, and it's definitely a science to it.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that's going on right now that's getting ready to start in just a matter of days as the breeding season is underway. And as Ben Chafin's nose in there, it's just as important as going on to the Triple Crown Trail.
Hey.
Because the horses now are going to be the ones in just a few years going on that Triple Crown Trail.
That's right. It's the start of it.
Most good handicappers I know, my cousin Johnny would be one of them, actually. And Eddie Olczyk and some people like this over the years that I've dealt with, Mike Battaglia, Bob Newmeyer. They know the importance also of breeding, and they will take a look at the breeding pattern. I think most good handicappers do that.
You have to be thorough.
It's consistency. It's like you see, again, as Steve Haskin was talking about, you see a Bob Baffert horse, a Todd Pletcher horse this time of year, you pay extra attention. Basketball, you see a Mike Krzyzewski team out there, you pay extra attention.
Maybe not so much with Calipari the last few years, but
maybe a John Calipari for all you Kentucky fans. That's where we're based, of course. Yeah, but you do pay attention because of track record, because of breeding. So thanks again to Duncan and to Steve Haskin for being on the show this week. Look forward to talking more next week, and we're going to talk about the importance of having that super horse, how important it is for racing. Will they have it this year? And we're going to also talk a little bit more about politics and horse racing and what's going on with the coalition. Be sure to join us then. So for Scott Hall, Ben Chafins, and Thomas Kenny, I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for listening again this week to The Horse Racing Show.